Hello, everyone. My name is Alexis Diaz. I'm a senior at Hayward High School. This is my first year with Lunchbox International, and it has been a very inspirational experience. I recommend everyone to go downstairs to check out our table with HHS Feminist Club, which will have copies of my poem, which I'll be reading part of today. I am a strong, independent woman. Let me repeat myself. You obviously weren't listening. I am a strong, independent woman. I am independent because I can think for myself. I don't need Cosmo 17 nor Vogue to tell me how to dress. I don't need the media to tell me how to look. I am more than what you see. I am more than my face. I am strong not only because I can endure the pain of having my body being ripped open just to give birth. I am more than my body. I am a temple that deserves respect. I am not a tool for your pleasure. I am not your servant, maid, nor chef. I am a rule breaker and maker. Don't call me baby or babe. Do not undermine me, for I am powerful beyond belief. I am a strong, independent woman. I am strong because I am connected to my inner being, to my spiritual surroundings, and with life all around. Yes, I may live in my emotions sometimes, and you may scrutinize my expression, but I can walk with my head held high and a smile on my face. I have a voice, I have a mind, I have a soul, none of which you can control. I will strike you down with my very last breath, never hesitating to become the woman I'm meant to be. I am strong and independent. I am a woman.
Wow, that was just wonderful. Thank you, Alexis. It makes me want to go back to high school and have that attitude, which I didn't at the time. So that was just great. Well, I just want to welcome all of you here. We're really excited about this event tonight, and I hope it's a good experience for all of us here, and that we're all going to come away having really learned something, gotten some ideas, have some things that we want to go out and talk to each other about later. And I will mention that later, right after we're finished, we will be having a reception with food and drink downstairs. So I thank all of you for coming. This is a program that this is really our third one. We skipped last year, but we've had Hayward Honors Women events, and we decided to resurrect it this year. I think in part because this last year in 2014, our percentage of women on city council grew from, well, I don't know about the percentage because that's too hard to figure out, but the number of women on our 7-member city council grew from 1 to 3, and the two newer members, Elisa Marquez and Sarah Lamnon, who actually is here and I think she's still downstairs getting things ready. Oh, is she here? Is she up here? Oh, Sarah. Okay, she is here. Good. But came to me a few months ago and said, we really have to do something this year to honor women during Women's History Month. And so I want to thank them for doing that, because I think what we have come up with is a really good program. And the three of us have been very involved in the planning of that. And so thank you, Elisa and Sarah. No good program, no good effort is just, women alone can't do it. And being a feminist and caring about women's rights does not mean that you can't work with men. And so we've had some very good men working with us. I'll start with my former colleague on the council, Mark Salinas, who really came up with the idea 3 years ago to do a Hayward Honors Women teach-in then. So he has been helping us with planning this one too. And then we have a couple of men on staff, our management, from the city manager's office, both of them actually, John Stefanski, and then I really want to thank our community and media relations officer, Frank Holland, for all the effort he has put into this event. For getting the word out and for helping us organize the program, and just in so many ways he helped us put this on. So we've been working on this, and we hope that we have planned an exciting evening for you. I think one of the things that we are very excited about is that, and I get to introduce her, we have really a Bay Area media star here with us tonight, Janet Reilly, and we're really honored that she agreed to come and moderate this panel. As you probably know, she is the host of The Mix with Janet Reilly, which is a monthly news magazine. And I think it's really important that we have serious journalists in our world that deal with serious issues. The things that come before us on council are often very complex, and sometimes we get a lot of reading material. Sometimes I feel like, how does anybody know what we're even talking about? But, if you pay attention and if we have good journalists like Janet Reilly, it can help us all understand what's happening in our world. She also has contributed a lot to her own community of San Francisco. She has served as the president of the board of directors of the Golden Gate Bridge Highway and Transportation District. But I think even to me more interesting is that she's a co-founder and president of Clinic by the Bay, which is volunteers in medicine clinic in the Excelsior District of San Francisco, which actually doesn't rely on taxpayer dollars, but does provide wonderful health care services to people. And all communities are grappling with that issue right now. And Janet finally has local ties. She is the former corporate director of public relations for Mervyn's department store. So we no longer, as we all know, have the presence of Mervyn's Corporation in our city, and we were glad to have it earlier. And so she has been a worker in Hayward, and she knows our city. And then before I actually turn this over to her, I just wanted to mention that we will be presenting each of our panel participants with certificates. Cities, we always do certificates. So one from the city of Hayward, thanking them for their participation, and we thank our local assembly member, Bill Quirk, who also provided certificates from his office, and we'll be giving each of them one of them. So without any further ado, I am going to turn this program over now to Janet Reilly. Thank you.
Well, Mayor, thank you so much for that very kind introduction. And don't we miss Mervyn's? We do miss Mervyn's. I am so happy to be here back in Hayward. As the mayor said, I worked in Mervyn's, and some of my work colleagues from Mervyn's are here this evening. So raise your hand. Show me where you are. Yay! I have always thought that this was a fantastic city with a great, rich history and a great diversity in Hayward that is really lovely to see. So it's really nice to be back here today. And I cannot think of a better way to start celebrating Women's History Month, although it's already at the end of the month, than by participating and being the moderator for this incredible panel with a wonderful group of women. And you can just look up here and see how different they are in terms of age and ethnicity and background and profession. And so hopefully I know that that's going to lead to a very, very rich discussion. We want you to be involved in this dialogue. So it's not just a question and answer session, but really you asking questions and getting involved in the conversation and enlightening us and enlightening each other. So I think that you may have received some index cards on your way in. I hope you did. If you didn't, there are folks in the back. So as we go on with our panel, please, write down some questions, and we've reserved the last 15 minutes for you to ask questions and for our panelists to answer them. So we're going to begin. Our first panelist this evening is Gail Steele. Likely needs no introduction here in Hayward. She has been active in East Bay politics for nearly 4 decades. She is a former Hayward City Councilmember, an 18-year member of the Alameda County Board of Supervisors representing Hayward. Gail has worked on behalf of the young people in Hayward and beyond her entire career, including, founding the Eden Youth Center in 1976, and she was telling me on our way in that Merv was actually one of the first funders of the Eden Youth Center. So amazing how it's a very small world. So please give a warm welcome to Ms. Gail Steele.
Well, I decided to do something special. My mother died when I was 15, so I didn't have her when I was an adult to talk about the family and what she thought about anything. But when I looked in her baby book, I was surprised to find a letter to the San Francisco Chronicle when she was 11 years old. And what is so astonishing to me, because recently I was in Sacramento, I didn't realize how recently the suffragette movement was. That California was the 6th state for women to vote in 1911. My mother was born in 1912. And the country did not adopt women voting for 10 more years till 1920. So, and that wonderful poem my mother would have loved. This is her letter to the Chronicle. I have read in the Chronicle, her name was Jane Brandenstein, by the way. I have read in the Chronicle the article about Girls' Week, and I think it was said about girls passing a law about carrying powder puffs is all wrong. It's nonsense. I knew it was said in spirit of fun, but I don't think it's fair to the girls. I know there are plenty of girls who think of nothing but hair, powder, and rouge, but there are a lot of good, hardy, sporty, healthy girls who have as much executive ability as any boy pretends to have. Look at Lady Astor. Did anyone ever hear her trying to pass a law enforcing the use of powder puffs? I thought the boy supervisors favored women. Why not give the girls a chance? How about the Red Cross? Who organized it? Women. Kindly tell me what would have been done about World War had it not been for women. In the olden days, I could understand any aversion to women, but since Elizabeth Cady Stanton said, and Susan B. Anthony, why not have women officials? There are women in Congress today, and nothing has been said against them. There is a woman supervisor right in San Francisco, and she's one of the best in the board. I, for one, expect to hold an important public position when I grow up, and I strongly favor Girls' Week. The paper said there is to be a Girls' Week sometime. Sometime is too indefinite. We want it now.
That's awesome.
I guess the final thing, she would have been surprised to know that her daughter was the third woman to be elected to the Hayward City Council and the third woman to be elected to the Board of Supervisors.
Yeah. So, Gail, it's pure destiny, and politics and public service is in your DNA. That explains it all now. Thanks for sharing that. Amazing. Our second panelist is Cecily Joseph. Cecily is Vice President of Corporate Responsibility and Chief Diversity Officer for Symantec Corporation. Symantec, of course, is a global leader in security, storage, backup, and availability software. Cecily has received multiple awards and accolades for her pivotal work on behalf of women, human rights, and gender equity. In 2014, she was named a Woman of Influence by the Silicon Valley Business Journal. Please welcome Cecily Joseph.
Thank you, Janet.
You're welcome.
I'd also like to thank the mayor, Councilwoman Elisa Marquez, and the organizing committee for inviting me and for organizing this great event and making it a panel, because I've gotten to know some incredible women up here. So I'm really honored to be here. I've worked in the corporate world, primarily in technology, for the last 25 years, first as a corporate attorney, and now with a focus on environmental and social responsibility and diversity. I'm a proud resident of Hayward. I make my almost hour-and-a-half commute each way, every day to Silicon Valley, always coming back home. And I've been doing that for about 20 years. My husband Maurice and I are raising our two kids here. They've attended All Saints School and they're in Monroe Catholic High School. And a lot of the work that I do is focused on building a more diverse and inclusive workforce. I've really dedicated my career to that. Even though women are 50% of the population, we make up less than 5% of the CEOs that are in the largest 500 companies, the S&P 500 companies in the United States. There are only 24. And I heard somewhere recently that there are actually more men named John that are CEOs than there are women that are CEOs of U.S. companies. So we have a lot of work to do. We've got a long way to go, but we've also come a long way. I can say that even though in the technology sector where I work, where women only make up about 28% of the population across most of the tech companies, including companies like mine, Symantec or Google or Yahoo, it's pretty common that you see a small percentage of women. in my tenure, I can see that the voice around this issue and the dialogue is getting louder and louder. And especially diversity in general, but especially around gender. And what's interesting, it's not just women talking about this topic anymore. It's also men engaged in the topic. Men have daughters. Men are starting to realize that having a more diverse workforce gives them a competitive advantage, brings more different thoughts and ideas to the table, and companies do better. So it's really interesting to see that developing and see that shift that's occurring today. Thank you.
Cecily, do most other companies, the other tech companies, have your position? Do you have counterparts?
Yeah, most tech companies have diversity positions, and I would say that if they didn't, they do now. Because there's definitely been attention drawn. If you read in the news, there have been lots of companies that have published their diversity data. And what is, even though diversity data as a whole has been pretty bad, it's shocking the small percentage of women that work for tech companies. And what's even worse is when you break that number out and you look at the percentage of women who are technologists. Yeah. That tends to be about 15%.
15?
Mm-hmm.
Oh. Well, we're happy that you're there.
Thank you.
We're happy that you're with us tonight. Our third panelist is Farima Pour-Khorshid. She's a proud Hayward native, a third-year Ph.D. student, a teacher activist, and a part-time bilingual kindergarten teacher. She believes in the power of education to liberate and strives to work in solidarity with teachers, students, and communities to transform public education both locally and around the world. So please give a warm welcome to Farima Pour-Khorshid.
Thank you. I have to say that never in a million years would I have ever thought that I would be sitting here today, ever. And it's such an honor and such a great privilege. I've always been very ride or die Hayward. For those of you that don't know what that means, it means very committed to my community. I went to Shepherd before it became the SIAC Center. I went to Tyrell Elementary School. I went to Cesar Chavez. I went to Tennyson High School. And from there, I went to Chabot Community College. Very proud alumni from Chabot Community College. Also Cal State East Bay, where I got my bachelor's, my teaching credential, and also my master's degree. And I continue to teach in Hayward because of the fact that Hayward made me who I am today. I also just want to take this opportunity to acknowledge the presence of my brother who, although, I'm sorry, is not here physically. I would not be sitting up here if it was not for his guidance now, even from heaven. I appreciate so much how much he spoke life into me. So even when I wasn't able to really view myself as a powerful woman, he always spoke life into me and told me that I was a Latina revolutionary. So I just want to acknowledge him, and I want to thank you all for having me here today.
Farima, as all the other panelists, have a fantastic story, and I hope that she'll take the opportunity to tell you a little bit about sort of a defining moment in your life. And just a great example of how one experience, one individual in your life can really change your world. And it's a great uplifting story. So thanks so much for being with us. Our final panelist is Ana Rangel. Ana is a recent UC Berkeley graduate and a former participant in outreach programs such as Puente and Upward Bound. She is currently working as a college advisor, helping students and their parents plan for college. Her long-term goal is to make higher education readily available to first-generation and underrepresented students. Please give a warm welcome to Ana Rangel.
Thank you, Janet, for that introduction. Like Janet said, my name is Ana Rangel, and I was also born and raised here in Hayward. I went to Burbank Elementary School, Winton Middle School, and graduated from Hayward High. I am the oldest out of two siblings that I have, and not only am I the first in my family to attend college, but also graduate. I received my bachelor's in social welfare from UC Berkeley not so long ago, and I attribute a lot of my success to not only the support that my parents gave me, but also the guidance that Puente and Upward Bound gave me. If it wasn't for them, I know for sure that I would have a different journey, and possibly I would not have been sitting here in front of you today. Also, growing up in a very traditional Mexican household has really shaped not only who I am, but also the choice that I made of going into the education field. As a young Latina, not only did I have to juggle between academics and extracurricular activities, but also coming home and having to help care for my siblings, go to appointments with my parents so I could translate for them, and just oftentimes even working with my mom. And so because of those experiences, I have decided to, I found my passion within education and helping other students that come from a similar background than me. Just like Farima, I could never imagine that I would be sitting here, and I feel really honored that the city where I grew up in and have spent most of my life would invite me to be a part of such a great event.
Ana, we're so happy that you're here. So, Gail, let me start with a question with you. In the early 1970s, women were really just beginning to enter into public office. What was your experience in what I would say is a man's world?
I don't really think that I had an experience of thinking it that way. I got active in the beginning with the League of Women Voters, and it was the League who got me interested in the diverse issues that the community faced. And one day, a person called up and said, why don't you run for city council? And I thought, you're out of your mind. And I talked to people, and they said they thought I should try it. And so I did. And I always had very little money. Not that I wouldn't have liked more, but that's all I raised. But what I did is I walked a lot. In those days, people before me hadn't walked quite as much. But I think
meeting voters.
Yeah, door to door.
Right.
But I think what happened is that my relationship has been with the community and the issues of the community and listening to the community. And I think that's a different perspective where other elected officials have come from, at least in those days. You had money and so forth. So I didn't come from the men's perspective, but I have to say I often felt it was because of my positions that people didn't appreciate me on this council, because I was an environmentalist and I tried to I and the whole neighborhood stopped the widening of B Street. And certain council people didn't talk to me for 4 years or 8 years. And that case, a woman lawyer represented our community for $15 an hour, and she went on to be the attorney of Boulder, Colorado. And that case went all the way to the Supreme Court, and we won that you had to do an environmental impact. So I was thinking of myself more as fighting windmills and chasing issues versus the men who were all voting the other way. It was more the issue I thought I was fighting.
Did you feel compelled to introduce legislation that sort of revolved around women's issues other than environmental?
Not at that time, because council really was sort of more land use type of issues. Yeah. And I think why I wanted always to be on the Board of Supervisors, because there is where, and again, I didn't think of it as women's issues, but children's issues, domestic violence, people abusing their families, sexually abusing their families, and nobody listening. All of those issues were women's issues, and that's where I wanted to be. So the council was not as much where I was as what the Board of Supervisor was.
Yeah. What was your proudest moment as a councilwoman, would you say, here?
I think winning B Street. I don't know that I thought, I guess what helped me is I felt so good that I could be myself, not have to raise a lot of money, that I couldn't. And when I ran for re-election, I was a top vote getter at that time. And so I felt I had a connection with the community, and that made me feel very good and very proud.
And do young women still come to you and ask you for advice? Should they run for office? Is it worth it?
Well, the one thing I would say to young women and to anybody who wants to run for office is I don't think people realize how you have to give to the community. You have to be dedicated, and things take forever to get done. And if you think they can get done in 1 year or 10 years, you're wrong. And I think learning that it's the longevity that makes things happen very often for anybody in political office.
Right. That stick-to-itiveness is really important in any industry.
That's right.
I would also say, though, just listening, I think you represent that uniqueness that women bring because you're authentic. And I think that's something that women bring to public office and to jobs that makes them very different and trustworthy,
Right.
because of your authentic nature. Yeah.
Thank you.
Cecily, in your position at Symantec, part of your job is to help management build an inclusive workforce. Would you say that you've been successful?
No.
See, women will admit their failures or shortcomings. That's a difference, too.
It's kind of job security, though, or no.
Smart.
I would say that we are on the journey.
Right.
And I would say that we're probably focused on 4 main things. So one is, in order to have an inclusive workforce, you really need to hire diverse people. Mm-hmm. So you need to intentionally, and I use the word intentionally as a manager, hire, if we're talking about gender, you need to hire women. You need to promote women, and you need to seek out candidates that are women if you want to increase gender in your workforce. It sounds simple, but not often done. So I would say, bringing up the numbers is very important. Secondly, there's the issue of tokenism, right? So oftentimes we think, well, we've hired that one woman or we've promoted that one woman, that's enough. But I think a lot of studies show that if you just have one, then you just have a person who feels excluded. If you have 2, then you oftentimes have people who feel competitive or pitted against each other. And so the magic number is really 3. And you kind of see that even on boards. They say if you can have at least 30% women on a board or on a council, then you've actually hit, or more, then you've hit the magic number. The next area that I think is really important for the inclusiveness building of a culture is around unconscious bias training, or being aware of your unconscious bias. We all have them. We all, deal with issues. I was sharing, actually I'm happy to share, somebody at work was sharing with me that they're thinking about not promoting or moving somebody forward, and the comment was, they walk down the hall and she doesn't really smile. And I thought, wow, is that something you'd say about a man, that they don't smile? So, an unconscious bias kind of coming through there, and I think awareness of that and being, trying to change those behaviors is really important for any type of organizational culture. And the final piece is setting goals and measuring them, and keep holding yourself accountable. So if you say you're going to invest in this as an issue, set goals and say, we plan to increase our gender by X% and publish the data, show why it's not happening, and hold leadership accountable for not doing better. And so that's the model that we're trying to follow.
You said something that was unconscious bias. How do we combat unconscious bias?
So I think we combat it by acknowledging that it's there, first of all. And we all have it, right? We've all been taught things. We all have stereotypes that we wrongly believe in, that we see on TV, or that we've come to believe. And so I think the first thing to do is to acknowledge that you have them, and then to set about not letting them get in the way of important decisions at work. And so what we're doing, for example, at my company, when I see a lot of organizations doing, is actually going through training, so that people start to really dig down layers and start to understand those issues that are presenting themselves in the workplace.
Every day in the front page of the paper now, we're reading about the trial Ellen Powell versus Kleiner Perkins. Ellen Powell is suing her former employer for gender bias for $16 million, and the jury, I believe, just is going out tomorrow, and will take this case under consideration. Has this changed the dialogue in Silicon Valley?
Not yet.
Not yet.
I think people.
Has it opened up the dialogue? Are people talking about it maybe more?
I think people were talking about, quite honestly, the issue before.
Yeah.
I think people think this is interesting. They're paying attention. Gender discrimination lawsuits are not really that unusual, as are any types of lawsuits in companies. But I think this one is of such high profile that people are paying attention, because these kind of facts are really hard to prove, and I think people have tended to stay away from filing these kinds of lawsuits because of that. So I think people are really paying attention to see what comes out of it, you know, and to see where it leads. It's going to be really interesting.
Yeah.
And I don't think it matters if she wins or loses. I think because it's really elevated the dialogue.
Yeah. That's for sure. Well, Farima, you deal with education, an educator and a teacher activist. I love that. You want to transform, you say, public education in the United States, specifically to help young girls lead in and take leadership roles. How do we do that?
So that's a loaded question, and I'm going to try not to take up too much space. But what I will say is I think that one of the first things that we have to realize is, what are we defining as the purpose of education? Because that's first and foremost. If the purpose of education is to develop leadership, is to make this world a better place, is to think about conservation and taking care of our environment, to think about loving each other more, if those are the purposes, then the direction in which we're going in education is going to look different. So I think that right now we're at a place with accountability, with standardized testing, where it's very individualistic, and I think it's teaching children very early on that they don't do school well, particularly young women. And I think that one of the things that we have to go back to, which again I've heard time and time again, depending on who I talk to in public education, that the pendulum keeps swinging, right? And so I think that one of the things that we have to think about is, how is public education developing leadership within young women, and what are we teaching young women in terms of what leadership looks like within their own gender? Most times when we're thinking about transformation, resistance, movement building, we really tokenize, or we really focus on the males in the movement, right? We know about all the males, and very rarely do you ever hear about their radical spouses, radical wives, or women in the movement who have done a lot to carry the movement forward, but that seem more as accessories and are not really grounded in the ways that we're learning about these kinds of movements. I also think that when we're thinking about, the ways in which we're learning within schools, right now we're living in a really different time with technology. Even when I was younger, I didn't have the social media, I didn't have the things that young women are dealing with today. And so there's a certain kind of education that they are getting. And if we're not really intentional within public education to create a space for them to interrogate that, to understand how this medium is actually kind of shifting the way we think about ourselves as women in terms of our identity, in terms of our agency and power, in terms of what our role is within society, I think it could have a really deep effect. I also think that there are programs that I was fortunate to be a part of. There are folks in this room now that really impacted my sense of leadership skills. The Puente program, Ms. Rios is standing right in front of me. I'm thinking about La Familia. Ande Peña's right in front of me. Actually, Elisa Marquez was part of La Familia as well. All of these programs were very intentional about making sure that young women understood their roles within creating change in their own communities. So if we don't actually create an intentional space to do that, then I think that there's a whole other way that young women are going to understand their own power.
So go back to social media. How do you think social media is particularly affecting young girls?
I think that, well, first and foremost, I think that we're not doing enough in public education to actually educate young people about the effects of posting certain things online, right? The reality is your employer will Facebook you and see what you have going on, right? And colleges as well. I've been part of different committees where we will go and find someone's name on Facebook and let's see what their activity is like. And so a lot of the times we think, even if our profile is set to private, we can upload all of these things that end up having a really lasting effect on our lives and our careers in the long run. So I think that's one aspect. I think another aspect is the whole selfie movement, right? Now, don't get me wrong, I love taking me some selfies, rightfully so, but I think that there's an obsession of outward appearance, right? There's an obsession of what is supposed to be beautiful and what's not, about what's sexy and what's not, about what makes you feminine or what doesn't, right? And so there's a hypersexualization, I think, right now going on through the media and popular culture, that if we're not very careful to deconstruct those things with our young women, they're going to understand that as the standard of beauty, as the standard of power. And I think that there is no right or wrong answer. I just think that we need to open up a space for young women to actually interrogate those things and to think more deeply about the effects that it would have on their future and also just on their construction of who they are.
You know, today actually more young women are graduating from college with advanced degrees than boys are. But that doesn't seem to be translating yet into executive positions or positions in the workforce. Is that just a matter of time? Is it just lag time? Or is there more, again, that we could be doing?
I definitely think that there's a lot that we can be doing. I know that for me, I would not be in a Ph.D. program right now. I would not be taking on the leadership roles that I am taking on had I not had specific women mentors that were in positions of power that actually let me know that I could also be in those positions of power. Again, the women that are in this room right now were women that I looked up to because they embodied something that I wanted to have. And so I think that's one thing, is what are we doing to create programs to have these young women have mentors that they can see in those positions of power and to have real conversations about what they have to do to navigate that. I think one of the challenges, especially being in academia and in the PhD program, is that there are a lot of men in these spaces that are not accustomed to being challenged in certain kinds of ways by women. And so how do we develop confidence within young women to speak truth to power? How can we get that to be something that is not only normalized, but something that makes them feel comfortable when they see an injustice, how to address it and how to take those roles on. And I think a lot of the times, because of the gender roles that we have, it's like, well, women should be polite. Well, let me not argue. I shouldn't, it's this idea of what makes you professional or polite and what doesn't. And I think that can really get in the way of decision making that ends up really affecting the most marginalized and underserved people that we should be working for and serving, right? So, yeah.
Powerful woman.
Yeah.
So, Ana, you're also in the education field, and you are a college advisor, and you specialize in helping first-generation college, attendees to get through that process, and that must be incredibly rewarding, but lots of obstacles. So what are you seeing in your field?
Definitely. So a lot of it, what I see also has to do with the cultural background that students come from. So like if their parents are immigrants and the student is the first generation, their parents aren't familiar with how to navigate the bureaucracy of the educational system here in this country, and just being able to help them out is, like you said, very rewarding, but at the same time challenging, because not only am I trying to bring all the resources to the student, but also the family and the parent to get them on board and have them understand why their young female child should move away to college, right, to explore and meet new people and have more networks. Something that really helped me out and is something that I try to adapt are college tours. So physically taking young Latinas or just students in general to visit college campuses so they could visualize themselves and be able to see that they do belong in higher levels of education, and to have them talk to students that come from similar backgrounds that are in college already so they could share those struggles and stories of, maybe their parents didn't let them go to college, but yet here they are. So another thing to add to that is my work with parents. I find it's very, very important, because for myself, my personal experience, not only was I trying to navigate the system, but my parents as well. They didn't understand why I needed money to pay for the SAT or an AP, right? Why should I be paying for a test? Why do I even need this test? So kind of educating parents at the same time is something that really needs to step up its game and start happening more, specifically in the parents' native language. So like I said before, I would spend a lot of time translating for my parents because they were immigrants here. They weren't fluent in English. So having workshops specifically for me in Spanish for Spanish-speaking parents has been very, it has changed a lot of their perspectives, and I have seen they have been more supportive with their students because they understand. A lot of the time it's just because they don't understand the process or what's going on.
What fundamentally gave you the courage to yourself go on to college, and the advice that you're giving to these young women? What at the base of it, what do they need to get this courage?
Well, I feel for me, it all started at a very young age, and I didn't see it. I didn't know what was going on. So in Winton, I remember being a part of Latina Club, and it was run by 3 sisters, which I'm sure a lot of you know, the Canizales sisters, Claudia, Yanira, and Mayrita. So they actually took me on, and they became my mentors. And just being in this space where it was all woman, and we talked about different cultural issues, social issues, and they pretty much taught me what college was. They took me on my first college tour ever, which coincidentally was UC Berkeley, right? But I still didn't understand what UC Berkeley meant or college meant in general. But I think that it all started there in middle school, and then I went on to high school, and my Puente counselor, Lupe Santoyo, a very strong Latina woman, right? So unconsciously, I was picking up, their
cues.
Yeah, their cues, their characteristics, and just like Farima said, deep down, I did say, I want to be like them. What do I need to do to be like that, successful, right? So that's where it started. I went on to Berkeley, and I was a part of different Latino-based organizations and really working with outreach programs to bring students on campus and, again, have them see someone who went through the similar struggle or situation that they're going through, and reassuring them that it's not impossible, and there are obstacles, but no one said it was going to be easy.
That's right. Gail, how far have we come? 40 years.
Not very far.
Keep it real.
I mean, I'm actually.
We want this to be an uplifting panel.
You shouldn't have invited me. Sorry, I'm not that. I'm not
speaking truth.
I'm not the uplifting type. But I just. What was it?
I say, how far have we come in the last 4 decades?
I think it's amazing. In some ways, in recent years, I think we're beginning to roll ahead.
Yeah.
But it is just amazing when I stop to think how long it's taken, for women to get where they are. And it's in the assembly, there are 80 assembly people, and there's only 20 women or 28 women, for example. And it's the same everywhere. I wanted to ask a question of those people in education, because I definitely agree with much of what you're saying, but as a mother of 3 sons and raising a grandson, and some of the things that come out of his mouth are not appropriate. And I mean about actually girls. And I think it's extremely important that as we move forward with this dialogue to empower girls, we need to teach little boys that girls are important, and they're just as good as little boys, and one isn't necessarily better than the other, because I don't think that conversation is coming up in the schools in the process. So I wanted, if you could comment on any of that.
No, I absolutely agree, and I think that a lot of the problem is that we're not making that a priority in school. I think a lot of the socio and emotional aspects of learning and development is not being prioritized in schools, and that can have a major effect. So when we're talking about gender roles, young boys definitely need to challenge themselves to think about how they're thinking about women and how they are viewing themselves as men, and what that means to be a man or a woman in society today, with all of the different things that are thrown at us about what it means to be masculine or what it means to be feminine. I think it's definitely something that boys need to co-engage in with young women. I mean, even with sex education, right? They're split apart. It's this thing where it's like we are 2 different species, right? And it's like, this is something that I think has been constructed that we just kind of take it for granted. Why are these conversations not happening together? Like, in order for us to move forward, I think that there's a lot of these conversations that need to be had co-ed. Absolutely.
Go ahead, Ana.
Yeah, definitely. But to add to that, oh my goodness, I lost my train of thought. Yes. So whenever I witness something like that going on within my group of students or whatever, I always try to bring it back home. So especially if it's a male student, you have a mother for sure. You have maybe sisters, cousins, female cousins, is it okay for someone else to speak to them the way you're speaking to, whoever you're speaking to right now? And then that's when it kind of starts to click and they reflect and say, okay, well, no, I would be super mad and try to start something if something that disrespectful was said to one of their female family members. So it's always interesting to see, because thinking about kind of my journey, no one ever told me, no, you can't move forward, or no, you can't do this because you're a female. It wasn't ever bluntly said that way. But because of, like music and media and things like that, is things that we internalize. So kind of whenever you see it, really calling it out and bringing attention to it is what needs to happen more often in education and outside.
Cecily, we hear so much about the new economy, the sharing economy, especially in the technology world, where skills like collaboration and team building are so important, which we generally think of that women are very good at. Do you think that this opens up new opportunities, this sharing economy for females, that we're really, we're the ones who do it best?
Well, I do. I think that there's a lot of discussion around the fact that women bring unique skills to the workplace. Mm-hmm. So they are more collaborative. They work differently. So it's not better, it's just different.
Right.
And that those skills, coupled with the skills that men bring, can make a company much more competitive and much more successful. And I think given the types of tools and the way that we're operating today, the way that we collaborate more, just across, the way that we even plan this panel. I mean, some of us, did all of this virtually, and I think that it gives much more opportunity for women to participate in that. But can I also address something that you brought up earlier? Because it's a point about why women. So you had said something that was really interesting to me, which is women, more women are graduating from college.
Right.
And actually, there are more women in college today than there are men.
Yeah.
And so what happens when they get to work? I mean, is it just going to fix itself? Right? Maybe it'll just happen, right, by sheer numbers. But what I see happening is that women drop out of the workforce more than men. And they drop out of the workforce primarily because they have children. And so the shift that needs to happen is I think work needs to become more flexible. Yeah. And so I've benefited from this personally myself. So what I did is when I had my second child, I was able to go part-time. And I was able to do that for 5 years. Until my son started kindergarten. And what that meant is I didn't have to get off of the work wagon. I could continue, and then I could keep on going the same direction that I was in. And the other thing that work has done for me, it's allowed the flexibility of my schedule. So I can go in later, I can leave earlier, I can work remote sometimes. That's allowed me to have a continuous work history. And I think if more employers looked in technology, so going back to your technology and being more collaborative, and I think of technology as enabling that. The fact that we have all of this technology now, we can Skype from home, we can do all of our emails from, the soccer field. I mean, we can do so many things and be very productive that I think it should enable women to stay in the workforce and continue their journey and not have to drop out.
Can I piggyback on that?
Sure.
One thing that I think is really important to think about as well is the fact that when you look at the gendered professions, gendered meaning like female-dominated professions like teaching, like nursing, those positions are usually always funded, right? Under-resourced, they're underpaid. I know as a teacher, I can get up to 33 kindergartners at a time with no teacher's aide. I know my sister is a nurse, 30 plus patients, per caseload on a night. And I think that we have to be really careful about the ways that we are navigating those particular professions as well, if we want to keep it going and make it something that is going to be meaningful for women to be able to want to stay in those professions as well.
We know it's interesting, too, is over and over studies have shown that organizations that have flex time, family leave time, are the most productive companies, where people stay, where people want to be, that are incredibly competitive. And at the federal level right now, there is a fight going on trying to bring many of the policies that we have, great policies in California, to other states. But you'd be surprised how many states, do not allow their workers or require family leave time or any kind of flex time. And it's still a battle that we're fighting, every day.
Could I just add?
Sure.
I just remember that. Is it the woman who was in charge of Yahoo and then had a baby?
Marissa Mayer.
There was more discussion about how she couldn't do her job and have that baby. I couldn't believe it. Have you ever heard that with a person who has a big family from a man? I mean, they went on for week after week after week. Most women today who are working have to take care of their kids and have babysitters and all of that. Everybody has to do that.
Yeah.
I have to do it. Everybody has to do it. And yet that was like, you just can't be a CEO and have that baby.
Well, and you have to give it, and she's doing it. Well, you have to, it's a very different time, Gail, than when you were growing up. I mean, men really are taking a lot of the, family, responsibilities as well. And, it's something that's a recent phenomenon as well. I mean, even growing up, my father didn't have any of those responsibilities. It was all put on my mother. But there's much more, I think, enlightenment and, sharing of the responsibilities, which is one of the things that has, certainly changed for the positive in our society.
Yes.
What do you think are some of to all of you, what do you think are some of the most positive attributes or things that have helped you in your career simply because you are a woman?
Ooh.
There are advantages to being a woman.
Unfortunately, we do live in a society that values attractiveness, right? And I'm very well aware of that. So I'll go ahead and stop there.
I could say, there's two sides. As a manager, time and time again, I'll walk into a meeting with a male person on my team who reports to me, and people will always assume that person is the manager. So that's the negative side.
Right.
But the most positive thing that ever happened to me, and it is because I'm a woman, is from a very enlightened CEO that we had, who must have gone through all the unconscious bias training that there ever existed. And I didn't even realize what was happening, but he became my sponsor. And it wasn't a mentoring. He wouldn't say, let's meet my office and let me give you lots of coaching and tell you what to do. We never hardly talked. But all of a sudden he'd say, Cecily, I'd like you to come to our, executive session and present. That was a huge opportunity. Or he'd stand up in a company meeting and say, and Cecily is really a leader. And everybody would be like, who's Cecily? Where's that person? But it just threw, and then I realized, this is what a lot of guys get. Yeah. And I didn't even know what was happening. And that happened because I was a woman, and that was a man that did that. So I would say, too, that sponsors can also be males. They can be men who look out, and you can seek out those types of people as well to kind of help your career.
Did you ever tell him how much you appreciated that experience?
I did.
It's nice.
Yes.
Yeah, but that's how you look is really funny, because I know you're right, but I come from the other end, the frumpy person, and my board colleagues would always say, you're so Berkeley, but you're not Berkeley. Dress Berkeley. And actually, I'm much more conservative than Berkeley. But they do talk about it. I want you to know the men on the Board of Supervisors are always, they come in and they say, I like your suit, to another man. Gee, you have a good tie. Where did you get that? Where did you get those shoes? And I'm thinking, are you kidding me?
You have to learn how to take a compliment sometimes, Gail.
No, it's not to me, it's to them.
Oh, to them.
They
compliment each other.
To each other.
I get it.
About where they bought their suit. Did they get it in China or Japan or the whole darn thing? They are just into this, how you look versus who you are. And that's the problem.
It is. I also think, too, specifically in academia, what I found is that in my particular area, I look at social justice education, and so a lot of that field is dominated by men. And I think that there's a consciousness that it's dominated by men, and so because there's that consciousness, it's created opportunities for me to kind of shine, right? Because they're very intentional now to say, wait a minute, there's too many men on this panel, or there's too many men at this event speaking. How can we open up space to make sure that we have some empowered women to also share that space? So
I want to remind you too, take your pens out. If you want to ask a question, please write it down. If you need pens or the index cards, I think we have some volunteers. Great. So Ana and Farima, do you feel like girls now, or that you even yourselves being young women, feel like you're of limitations because you're a woman?
No. And again, no one has ever told me, bluntly, no, you can't do this because of your gender. But it will make things harder, right? Because of this whole double standard type of idea. I don't know if you guys remember a few years back, Pantene, the shampoo commercial, they made a commercial where they showed a male as the CEO and he was the boss. And then they showed the female and she was bossy. They showed a male being persuasive, and then they showed the female being pushy, right? So it's just these whole double standards that don't help out, right? And so just bringing conscience and awareness to them is really having more people think about it, and like Farima said, create conscience and saying, okay, wait a minute, this doesn't look right. We need more representation, whether it could be, gender-wise or ethnicity-wise, etc. But no, I don't feel like my gender will limit me from pursuing my goals or anything like that. Like I said, it can make things maybe harder, but I strongly feel that we come from a line of warriors. So our mothers, our grandmothers, even if they weren't specifically in the workforce, they have gone through a lot. Like, for example, my grandmother having more than 5 children and running a household, and at the same time, she pretty much wore the pants, even though my grandfather won't admit it, because who do they turn for advice, right? When they come home from work, the females. So I see it in my students as well, that they see these characteristics from their mothers and their grandmothers. So we all have the strength to move forward.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. And I just also, again, I'm just always looking at things through the lens of education. And I think that the one limitation that I will say is that because we're more kind of in a direction of schooling, focusing on schooling as opposed to education, schooling as conformity and understanding role, that kind of thing. I think that the limitation will be that women are not going to feel empowered if they don't feel that they're performing well. And usually in underserved and poor communities, when you don't have resources and you don't have, extra support, you may not navigate that system very well. And, you had mentioned earlier about my story, and one story that I will say is that I got in trouble when I was in high school, and part of me being in trouble, I had to do there was 2 different punishments. And so one of the punishments was I had to go to juvenile hall every single weekend, and within that space, I was punished, right? And I was treated a certain way, and it was very much understood that I was a bad kid or I was a bad girl. I was with all the bad girls, right? Where another part of my punishment was I had to do my community service at La Familia County Counseling Center with Ande and with Elisa, right? And within those community service hours, I had to go through a series of workshops of, self-image and safe sex and popular culture and all of these different things, but in a way for me to go back into my community and to be a peer educator and to empower other young women, right? Now I think we're in a place where discipline is very punitive in schools, and we're kind of given this idea that if you don't fit this particular way of being, then you don't belong and you're pushed out of schools. And I think that can have a really devastating effect on women in particular, because you end up wanting to find belongingness in other areas, and those areas can have really lifelong lasting effects that can kind of leave you in a system that you shouldn't even have to be at, if that makes sense. But
And I would just add that same, what you just described, in companies it shows up as they're not a good fit.
Right.
You kind of hear, I don't think they're a good cultural fit for our company. But can't quite put your finger on what it is, but they, maybe they don't play golf, or I don't know what it is, the stereotype, but yeah.
Do you all have mentors?
Can I ask, you've asked that question, and I couldn't think of a single mentor, and I realized I got started doing this with the League of Women Voters, and they are the most wonderful group of women anywhere, and they all have different interests in the community, in their families, whatever it is, and I learned so much from them, and each one in a different way, and I realized all my closest friends are women, and they are, in fact, like mentors, because I can always call them and say, this happened, what happened? Another woman I want to mention is like Doris Rodriguez, who was a councilwoman who passed away. Well, I get stuck, I'm not sure whether I was wrong or I got too mad or whatever. I could call her and say, what do you think? And so women have always been there for me, primarily, and I just didn't put it all together, so I wanted to say that.
Well said. Well said. You want to answer quickly? Any of you have mentors?
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, it all started back in middle school, and I don't think I would have the same journey that I do now if it wasn't for them. And it really does take a village, right? And, my support from my mom, but then she couldn't help me navigate a college application, so I had to look for resources elsewhere. So definitely, and I continue to go back to them and, pick their brains and, okay, this is what my next step is. How should I go about it? Things like that. So definitely, I think mentors are really, really important.
And knowing which areas, right? Because I may need a mentor to navigate, becoming a teacher where I would go to a particular person, but I also would need a mentor to understand how to navigate death and grieving from my mother, right? Who may have not gotten a college education, but she's one of the strongest women I know. So really being intentional about knowing what your limitations are and finding folks that are strong and that can give you the example of how to move forward.
I'm going to ask Gail to be my mentor.
I think we're all going to ask Gail. Well, let's take some questions for the audience for a few minutes. Where are cards? Okay. Franks? Okay, first question. I was so very surprised to hear that all the panel members have a strong volunteer background. If you could create one organization that helps women, what would it be and what would it look like? Excellent question.
Nice.
Well, I can talk about one that exists right here in Hayward that I'm actively involved with, called Ruby's Place. They actually have a table downstairs, and Ruby's Place is an organization that focuses on helping survivors of domestic violence and provide shelter and services. And so I encourage us all to think about the fact that, as far as women's empowerment goes, so many women still deal with domestic violence issues. It's a reality in our lives, and it's an organization that, types of organization that we can support.
Another organization is Girls Inc. Now, they've changed and moved now, and I haven't been in touch for recent years, but Girls Inc. really was trying to do what everybody up here is talking about, and again, with kids that were low income, had all kinds of problems, and tried to make them have value in themselves. So Girls Inc. was a really good organization focusing on girls.
We hear a lot about the school to prison pipeline. I would love to do a school to teaching pipeline. And so one of the things that I envision doing, and I will do, and I'll do in the name of my brother, but I would like to see young women, actually, and young men. We need young men in the profession as well. But I would love to see or create some sort of nonprofit or volunteer organization where young people are going into the classroom, but specifically with a political analysis of what's going on in education and reimagining ways that they can use their own cultural background and identity and language as an empowerment to work with the young people that they see in those classrooms. That is a dream for me.
So I feel that there are enough kind of programs or agencies that help students from high school to college, but I feel that what's missing is what about after college, right? So I am still a first generation, and I can't turn to anyone in my family to say, okay, I want to pursue a graduate education. How do I do that? So I feel like some sort of support or a mentorship program where, first generation women or just people in general can come and seek that support, because even though I do have my mentors currently, I feel like, that is still needed.
How can we change the view of the word feminist? And is that to Ana and Farima, what do you think of when someone says, "Are you a feminist?" What would you say?
Hell yes.
She'd say yes, I know that.
Sorry.
Why am I even asking?
And I think that there's this negative connotation because the term has been co-opted. And I think that really what feminism means equality for women. So if you believe that women are equal to men, then you essentially are feminists, right? I mean, it goes deeper, but I think that there needs to be a deeper understanding of what it means and how to, and more particularly for men to be allies. And, Jeremiah Jeffries is in the room right now, and he always says, we don't use the word allies because that means you're not part of the struggle. So let me not use allies, but it's something similar that I haven't quite coined yet.
Cecily, what do you think of when you hear the word, if someone says, "Are you a feminist?"
Honestly, I think in a corporate environment, it alienates people.
Yeah,
and
interesting.
so we tend to use the word gender equity
Right.
as I just switch words. If diversity, there's a lot of diversity makes people
A lot of
uncomfortable.
euphemisms.
So now
Right.
we use the word inclusiveness. It doesn't matter to me. We're all, as long as we stay focused on what we're trying to accomplish.
Right. What do you think, Gail?
It's not a question I want to answer.
Okay. How can Hayward be more intentional in supporting and empowering girls of color?
Ooh. I feel like, especially my niece is in the audience right now. Kalia, stand up. Kalia has been experiencing some amazing programs that are already happening in Hayward that are very unique compared to other schools. You can sit down, baby. So one of the things that she does is, she's involved in Puente in middle school. And I think being able to have conversations about race, about class, about privilege, about all of those kinds of things that early on is really important. I also think that having extracurricular things like doing STEP and multicultural dances and education is really amazing. That's happening right now too in her school. So I feel like there's so many things that we're already doing in Hayward. The whole Made in Hayward campaign, to keep it real, so many folks that I went to school with are not that proud to say that they came from Hayward. In fact, they're more proud to say that they're leaving their community than staying, right? So I think that the fact that we have a slogan right now that's saying we are made in Hayward, we're proud to be from Hayward is a huge accomplishment as well. So I think that needs to be acknowledged.
I also think that more awareness needs to be brought around these already existing programs or activities, and also trickle them down to the parents, because, okay, I will confess, the only reason I applied to Upward Bound was because my mom made me, okay? She knew the benefit of it at the time. I did not. So I did things because she told me to, right? You don't mess with a Latina mom. You do what they say. So,
Right.
just getting that information down to parents as well is very important, because students aren't in school that long, right? A lot of the education does happen in the home as well. So if parents know about it, then it's more likely then students will participate in these type of activities as well.
Mm-hmm.
How do we get women to respect men if it makes more sense for the women to work and the man to stay home and take care of the family?
Ooh.
I think it would be wonderful if the man would stay home and take care of the family, and that we could go and do, if women want to be out in the community, whatever their job is, and a man would prefer to be home, why not? And I think we've been afraid to do that. There's a a feeling that if you do that, there's something wrong with the man. And I think that we see more of that. I think you mentioned that, where men are trading roles. Sure. And I think that that's good. I mean, I really believe families should be equal. Everybody needs to share in all the responsibilities, but that's a long time in coming. Yeah. And I think that I often think I probably would have been very happy if my husband would stay home and I could have gone and done what I wanted.
Have you had prejudice from other females? If so, what's your advice with best dealing with this?
So I have, and I think it happens when you just don't have enough women, and you feel like you're, because I said before, tokenism, you feel like you're competing with each other. And so I think the best way to deal with it is to make sure that you model the right behavior and that you engage the women to be partners. And the other issue I've seen is women who are not supportive of things like flex time and those kind of programs, because they say, well, I didn't have that. You know, I worked 5 jobs and, you know, took care of 10 kids and, you know, I didn't have all those days off to do those things, so why do you need that? And so I've seen that also. But I think, you know, you have to educate women just the same way you have to educate men.
You know, I think there's another thing that has to be said. Just because someone is a woman doesn't mean they're doing the right thing. And, no, I really had experiences with women who act like men. I mean, they don't listen, they get... But really, you know, I admire so many women, but women who throw their weight around, who are not, do not represent the values that I think represent a community, that isn't okay. And just because you're a woman, if you're going to behave like that, that's not okay. And I don't want to support women who act like that. And, you know, in the elected field, often what happens with elected people is they have a direct pipeline to God once they get elected. And some women do that too. It's not just men. And women do get competitive, and they forget to be collaborative. They forget to take care of each other. And I know people who are like that, and it makes me sad, because often they're very smart, they do their homework, they know what they're doing, but they don't have the value of looking at a community as a team where people respect each other and you listen to each other. And I don't want to support women who are doing that.
Well, it's like, Madeleine Albright said, there's a special place in hell for women who don't help women. And
couldn't say it better myself.
I think we should almost end on that note, but we're going to have one more. We'll do one more question. You mentioned technology is growing and young women are grasping media attention, which could be negative or positive. What would you advise young adults, age high schooler, so they can use media more positively?
Yeah, I think having the conversation is really important. And I think all too often we kind of either disregard it as like, oh, that's what kids do now, or it's like overbearing and you're like literally monitoring every single thing. And so I think it's having the balance and really kind of creating a space to talk about it. Like I know my niece would get irritated. Actually, maybe let me not speak for you, but a lot of the times we'll be in the car and we'll listen to a popular song and I'll ask her, what do you think the underlying message is? What do you think they're saying about women? What do you think they're saying about our culture? Like and just getting them to think about it, I think is really important. And at the end of the day, you don't really have control over how kids, because I know me and my sister used to hide our telephone under the bed when my mom was asleep. So kids will find ways, right? So how can we be more intentional about giving them the tools that they need to be able to understand media better and to navigate it better?
At the same time, I feel like there have been women who have used technology and media in a positive way. For example, YouTube, right? There are a lot of good YouTube channels run by women, right? Specifically in science or different topics that they own it, right? It's their small business. There are different other outlets where women use technology to advance, right? Networking, working from home. You can have your own business online. You don't have to go anywhere. So I think that there has been positive usage of the internet and things like that, and we just need to kind of showcase that more so that more and more people start using it in that way as well.
Cecily, what do you see? What do you think about in the technology field? What do you think of the whole social media movement and the proliferation?
Well, Symantec is a cybersecurity company, so we spend a lot of time working on sort of the dark side of this,
right.
Helping companies and organizations and people protect themselves online. Education is key, so there are a lot of programs, but I think educating ourselves on how to manage the internet effectively is really important. And I think having young people see themselves all as cybersecurity professionals in a way that we're all responsible for our privacy and we're responsible for ethical behavior online, I think is key as well.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And those dialogues with our daughters and our nieces and our young friends is so important. And you have one reputation, and once you lose that, it's pretty difficult to get it back. And everything you put out there, right, is there forever. So final question, Hillary for president. Gail?
Yes.
Yes.
And by the way, no, they are beating her up like I have never seen in my life, and it's outrageous, and the Democrats need to speak up more. This is ridiculous.
Cecily.
Yeah, I recently had the great opportunity to hear her when she came to Silicon Valley and spoke. She spoke for like 2 hours. She was amazing. She's funny. She's got so many parts of her personality that we usually don't get to see when she's just giving a speech. I think she'd be an incredible president.
Amen. Farima.
I say me for president.
I see it. I see it, girl. Ana.
Of course. Aside from her gender, the experience that she has, and let's not, like Gail said, let's not support someone just because whatever they are. Let's look at their background. So definitely.
Right. Great. Well, thank you so much. How about a big round of applause for our panelists? And for our audience, for our mayor, for our city council women, thank you so much. There are refreshments down in the rotunda area. There are tables, and I so appreciate you being here. It was an honor. Have a wonderful night, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much for doing this.
I love being on the panel.
I love being on the panel.
Yeah.